Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Deb Bryant, the Marketing Coordinator at AVATA, and I will be your host for today's webcast, S&OP Cloud, Automating the Process for Executives. Presenting for you today are Ferguson Neal, Director of Integrated Business Planning and Principal at AVATA, Eric Domsky, VP of Supply Chain for Oracle, and Ed Hayek, Principal Supply Chain Consultant for AVATA. And now I will turn the presentation over to Ferguson to get us started. Ferguson?
Thanks, Deb, and appreciate everyone's attending today. We're going to have an agenda, as you see here, a brief introduction and overview, followed by the S&OP overview. We'll have a live demo, which my colleague Ed Hayek will be running us through. And then we're going to talk about our unique approach and the value that the solution that AVATA brings with S&OP Cloud Express, and some final thoughts to wrap it up. So with that said, let me give you a little overview for those who aren't familiar with AVATA. We are a system integrator and supply chain consulting firm. We specialize and focus on a lot of the applications that support the Oracle ecosystem. As you can see from the diagram on the right, we have a supply chain management in the cloud practice. We have an ERP cloud practice and an EPM cloud practice. We also have a lot of experience. Most of our consultants specialize in these unique applications, and we have a lot of experience in successful implementations. And we have a branch of management consulting that particularly looks at helping our clients with understanding some of the challenges they face, including assessments, financial benchmarking services that are unique to the supply chain environment. And we support all of our customers in the cloud applications with a managed service team to make these applications, once you've gone through the implementation, to make them sustainable and come to life. So that's just a little bit about AVATA. At this point, what I'd like to do is hand it over to Eric Domsky, the Vice President of Supply Chain for Oracle, and have a brief introduction from him on the overview of S&OP Cloud.
Well, thanks, Ferguson. Thanks for the intro. Just a little bit more about myself. So as the Vice President of Supply Chain for Oracle, I pretty much have responsibility for all of Oracle's supply chain, manufacturing, maintenance, IoT, all the three-letter acronyms that have to do with supply chain for Oracle within North America. I've been with Oracle for 10 years, but prior to that, I was with SAP for 12 years and then Manugistics before that for 5. So you can't see me, but I have earned this gray hair, and hopefully I'll provide a little bit of perspective here for you around this topic around S&OP, which quite honestly has been reviewed many, many different times by different people. Maybe I'll add a little bit different spin for you here. Let's just jump right into it. In the past 25 years of working across enterprise solutions, whether it's SAP, Manugistics, and now Oracle, what I see across all organizations is strategy is a pattern in a stream of decisions. And these decisions change over time. My favorite quote, quite honestly, is from a CIO in talking about his system of very disparate applications was, I said, how did you get into this mess? And his answer was, well, one good decision at a time. Well, that goes for S&OP as well. But when we take a look at the type of decisions you need to make within S&OP, it changes based upon time. In my mind, S&OP is all about time, and we need to have an adaptive solution that takes into these considerations. Whether you're talking about 6 months to 2 years, we have product line movements, we have capital investments we need to balance, we have new product introductions and how you measure that via a vitality index, and also basic supply chain network design questions. As we get closer in, all the way from T = 0 to T+1, whatever that means to you, it really comes down to supply-demand match and what other people decide or define as sales and operation execution, S&OE, rather than S&OP. So what we need to do is be adaptive to all of these changes, because one thing that we do know in supply chain is it's always a trade-off, and there is never a perfect solution. So whatever you're trying to do or squeeze in today might have ripple effects going on out into the future. The other thing that we know within business and S&OP is you need to be prepared for change. Metrics change, business goals change. Business goals definitely change, especially when there's a change of management and a change of perspective. Are you revenue focused? Are you operations focused, cost focused? Are you focused on number of turns or asset utilization? The market changes as well. So we need, again, an application that is flexible in order to bend as these changes happen across time, across people, across businesses. So what we've done is we've re-looked at a completely different approach to a S&OP process. This is a very common step process from financial review, product review, demand review, supply review, and executive review, that if you've looked at S&OP at all, these are the most common steps across an S&OP cycle. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to adapt a much more parallel process. I almost call it like, instead of cycle counting in inventory, it's more of a perpetual inventory process, okay? Where depending upon what your role is, your decisions you're making, whether it's capital requests out into the future or S&OE requirements in right up front, are all connected in a multi-level decision-making process. But most importantly, this process needs to be adaptive, and this process needs to be able to change its metrics and its flow depending upon the flow of the business. So we start getting into this concept I call supply chain buzzword bingo. You know, we all quite honestly start sounding the same, whether you're talking about the new digital supply chain, Industry 4.0, value, what platform you're on, this concept of cloud, which I now call the free space in the middle, and of course, supply chain planning, S&OP. So the big question that people ask is, so what? What's different? What is different in terms of how Oracle is approaching this concept of S&OP compared to, quite honestly, anyone else in the market? Let me get to that real quick. I hate to do this, but give you a little history lesson. It really talks about how applications have been evolved in the past 20 years. Everyone, and this is whether it's Oracle, whether it's SAP, whether it's JDA, it doesn't matter who is out there in the marketplace today. We have all evolved very similarly. We started out with a core, we expanded it, we did acquisitions, whether it was Oracle's own acquisitions or anyone else's acquisitions out in the market. We all know what they're all about. And then we overlaid some analytics and we made it faster using in-memory processing. But, and at the same time, in that 20 years, things changed. The market changed. The traditional supply chain changed, moved from a very serial-centric to a much more complex modern supply chain, as you see down the right. Also, I think the other big piece is people changed. I call it the amplification of how people absorb applications. When I first started doing hotline support, it was read the manual, if you would. Now the concept is no manual required. Doesn't mean that the job is more simple than what we had in the past. It just means that the expectations are applications that are very intuitive and guide you to resolutions rather than you having to hunt and find those resolutions yourself. So with that, what Oracle has put together in its entire cloud is a connected, unified, modern processes, taking the old idea of MRP and ERP and modernizing that across all of these processes throughout your end-to-end supply chain. That plan to produce piece, as you see there, from plan, make, optimize, is just one component of the end-to-end S&OP process. The big difference is now we're in a unified supply chain where demand is demand, supply is supply, orders are orders, inventories are inventory, costs are costs, where now the modern concept of omni-channel is built in. The processes of contract manufacturing and quality are now part of the organic nature of these applications with bidirectional simulation and embedded analytics across the entire end-to-end process. And of course, with this background perspective, what we do now, we build upon that S&OP process in a unified data foundation built upon the standardized modern functions where we've incorporated social. I call it business social. What do you answer first, an email or a text? I do a text. How do I communicate most frequently? Well, it's usually over my iPhone, especially when I'm traveling, and make it mobile ready. Embedded analytics. Now, analytics isn't this secondary process where I act transactionally and I have to evaluate separately. Those things have to be embedded with security as it needs today and a process-centric approach from left to right across your organization, but more importantly, from top to bottom. The answer is the question, so what? When decisions are made at the executive level, how are they then percolated down and enacted and acted upon at the local level? So with that, I want to pass it back to AVATA to get into some more detail around our S&OP solution, and more importantly, their approach, because I think AVATA provides a very unique approach. They've been our partner across Oracle's supply chain ecosystem for many, many years, have made the transition to cloud, and now come to market with a very unique S&OP solution. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to you. Thanks a lot, Ferguson.
Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate that. Some great information. And let's follow right up on that with S&OP Cloud. A lot of our clients are involved with many different applications and planning tools. And if you think about the history of that, there's most certainly a lot of them out there, and it can be confusing at times. And when you think about advanced planning, S&OP, or also known as IBP, Integrated Business Planning, falls into this category. And what's unique about IBP or S&OP is that it is the single application or process that allows you to look at your current performance, engage how you are tracking towards your long-term strategic financial expectations. And we're going to spend a little more time talking about that today. First, let's level set here. So when we talk about the S&OP process itself, if you think about it, it's really the monthly cadence that goes on for the different departments. And what we're trying to do is to accomplish a long-term planning horizon and integrate all those plans so we get out of the silo challenge that a lot of the organizations face today. Typically, it starts off with a new product review or new product introduction review, followed by a demand review, looking in demand in an unconstrained view. And then we align that with our supply review, supply and inventory, where eventually we have to do our rough cut capacity planning, and we constrain the plan. Reconcile that financially, very important. So now we have one set of number or one truth, so to speak. And then that is presented to the executive team for the last review and the executive review. And what we're doing there is we're answering the questions that executives have about how their current performance is aligning with their long-term strategy. If you think about the characteristics of S&OP, a mature process is typically going to have a planning process horizon of some 24 to 36 months. It's obviously done at an aggregate level, either a product family or subfamily. We're focused on the outcome being one set of numbers, not a multitude of plans that give different results and follow different task masters. We're looking at reconciling those so they're realistic. In other words, when you've come through the S&OP process and you're ready for the executive review, what we're presenting is a realistic plan that's been reconciled. And ultimately, what we're achieving here by looking at that long-term horizon is we're providing information that is critical for executives to make the proper decisions at the proper time. So we're really S&OP, when we talk about S&OP, is providing the executive team at your organization what it needs to know so they can make the right decisions. If you think about it, we talked about this before. S&OP, again, just kind of reiterate, and we'll see this in our demo. It's a 5-step process. It's the integration of actions and plans. And very important that your S&OP process needs to be based on proven performance. In other words, the right KPIs have to support what you're doing today on a monthly review, and those projections then, or those proven performances, are used to project how you're going to trend in the future towards your strategic goal. When done right, it can be done in a monthly cadence. The meetings don't take long. They can be done quickly. It is not, we're asking our demand planners and supply planners to drive a lot of this. It's not an overtasking requirement for them. And again, the output is we're trying to find those answers to the questions and do that with a high probability. When we talk about generating answers, if you think about it, there's the old adage, I want to know the answer before I ask the question. Many of us have heard this ourselves from our own executives or in the boardroom. And so how do we do that? How do we prepare ourselves? And S&OP is doing exactly that. When we think about the type of questions that are going to be asked or should be asked at the executive level, these are the answers your S&OP process is coming up with. Obviously, what's changed between this month and last month? Most common question we hear right off the bat. What new risks do we need to consider? This is very important, and if you don't have a long planning horizon, and if you're not reconciling all those plans, you won't be able to answer that question. What decisions need to be made now? Again, S&OP is about providing the executives with the proper information to make those decision points. And most importantly, and you'll see in our demo, do we have any critical constraints? And this is the challenging part. And when we get to the S&OP Cloud application, the exciting part about that is we'll illustrate how we can look at scenarios and look at those constraints and how it affects the plans once we reconcile them. At this point, I'd like to turn over the webinar to my colleague, Ed. Ed is going to be running us through a live demo of S&OP Cloud.
Well, thank you, Ferguson. I'm very excited to show some of the live software. But before then, what I wanted to do was just put a little bit of a frame around what you're going to see today. And what I'm showing is a scenario where we have a business that is going to be taking on a new customer. And so for a strategic question of when we take on that new volume, and in this particular case for a new customer where they want to stock up with a high volume in the very beginning of this relationship, we're going to take a look at how this sales and operations planning or S&OP tool can help in identifying what that new business means to the operation, and also how we can figure out a solution or rerun and run simulations to find and determine what the appropriate solution to our strategic problem is. In this case, too much demand, which right for anybody is a good problem to have, but still can pose a problem. So in this scenario, what we're going to take a look at is how a regular process running through the demand review at the beginning of this monthly process, how the demand review is going to take a look at that new demand, what that new demand means for the supply plan, and then we'll take the storyline from there in how we run a simulation and prepare the information needed for the executive team, executive steering team, to actually make that final determination of whether the proposed solution makes sense. So without further ado, let's go into the software. So now that we're in the live software, what I wanted to show a little bit is some of the ways that Oracle S&OP Cloud service is organized for you to run your process. One thing that I'll point out very quickly is the running through of the different data is done via tabbed browsing, and also the business intelligence side of presenting data is actually blended in within the application. And so the idea is really a one-stop shop for which all key stakeholders in the S&OP process can come, review information, and very efficiently make their fully informed decisions. And so the way that Oracle has presented information in this tool is number one, we have our different tabs for the different cycles or pieces within our S&OP cycle. Number two, we have what's known as information tiles. And these are just the key performance indicators within each of the different reviews, supported by more detailed analysis underneath. And so as we would select different key performance indicators, we would see these graphs update with the appropriate information. Now, in this case, we have a spike in demand, as you might have noticed. As we're heading up into quarter two of 2019 here, we've got a very large spike going from our run rate around 50 all the way up to 70. And this is that initial order from our new customer that we discussed. So in a typical S&OP tool, this might just flow through to the production plan, with production being asked to generate a very large increase in production over the coming quarter. And the way that would result in the S&OP plan, if we're running unconstrained, is we're getting a warning of resource overloading to the tune of about 34% higher than usual. Now, in this case, we're running an unconstrained plan, right, which is typical of S&OP tools, where it's giving us the warning and yet still projecting to have that resource utilization spike up to that higher percentage. So if I move over to the information tile here, what we'll see is a summary of the different production areas within our S&OP plan and exactly how much or how far each of those areas is going up with respect to the total utilization. Now from here, if I wanted to dig further into details, we can do that. However, what I wanted to show was a great strength in the new Oracle tool, which is applying the theory of constraints to our S&OP plan. So what we have in this plan view is the application of constraint-based planning. And in this case, what the tool has done is limited our available capacity and therefore available supply to shipments of our products by the constraint-based model that we put in the plan. And here's where we see an unmet versus net demand. As we take a look at the next quarter's total demand, we can see that unmet demand versus the net demand. And so we can see how really this spike in demand is really not yet being met within the plan due to the constraints that we have. And so what we can do is take a look at how this unmet demand, how our resource overloading might be increased to meet that excess demand. So in looking at the resource piece, what we can look at is which areas are being utilized today and dig into a little bit of how we interact with the plan and run another simulation. And so in this case, we can take a look at resources within our organization and drill directly from these metrics down into the resource plan. There we go, and we'll go to the resource plan by month. Now, in doing so, what we've done is we've gone from an overall plan metric, right, that overall resource utilization, starting with unmet demand, looking at resource utilization, drilling down into some supporting metrics, and now drilling down into the detailed plan within the S&OP software. And right here, what we can do, if we wish, is increase the resource availabilities, okay, and model, after discussing with operations, what can we do to increase availability of resources within this period. Now, we can do that through direct editing of the actual plan here, and then rerun the plan. And the results of that simulation then become our new plan to take a look at what's going on. In this case, what we did was had a discussion with operations, and operations came up with a plan to move some resources from a couple of a little bit less profitable product lines, shift them over to begin pre-building some of the new areas or new demanded products from that customer. And by putting those into place early, and then also getting new resources in place for this coming quarter, being able to meet that demand. And now we see the net unmet versus met demand. We're sacrificing a little bit of capacity early, but we're solving the bigger problem coming in the next quarter in order to do that. And so we can see how the resource overloading is we're still pushing the 100%, is still running a capacity-based plan. However, our problem has become much less. And so we're sacrificing a little bit of delivery coming up in order to meet a much bigger delivery here in the near quarter. And so with this operation, what we can do then is, once we've solved our supply review problem, okay, now we can move on to the financial impact and go to the executive review with a few things. One is we have our total demand that's expected to come in. We took a look at our constraint-based plan to see what that problem is going to cost as far as delivery goes. And now we took a look at a model where operations come up with a plan to increase capacity in order to meet that demand spike, and do so in a way that sacrifices very little from the other products. And so we can take a look at that and also compare plans for the executives. If we take a look at a cost comparison, when we look at the compared plans, we can actually, within this one dashboard, instead of flipping between plans, we can actually take a look at what that initial plan looked like compared to this one. And if I click OK here, what we'll see is we'll see this plan, our final simulated plan or recommended plan, compared to where we started. Okay, and in here, what we can take a look at is, from the executive review standpoint, we can look at the different profitability and overall delivery metrics. Or from this standpoint, we can take a look at how that relates directly to that comparison plan. So if I come in here and compare again, we will take a look at how this looks. And so with these plans together now, we can see how the unmet versus met demand problem gets solved. So we can see the red bars here go away, right? We got a very much smaller bars early on with our solution. It's all an internal solution, and the costs, effectively, if you look at the cost comparison, we got a little bit more cost basically to meet that demand. However, that's very far outweighed by the demand that we're actually going to be able to deliver on time for that new customer, make that new customer really happy. And so on many levels, one, we've looked at how demand forecast gets set and compared to the supply plans, how that supply plan can be constrained in the model in order to come up with a metric around how much demand is at risk or might not be met, and come up with a solution or rapid simulation to solve that problem. So really briefly, what I wanted to describe again is this type of scenario, this new customer scenario that we just went into the software to take a look at, or also many other strategic or tactical scenarios can be solved and solutions simulated and run very efficiently to determine really what the best course of action is based on new information or simulated results, as we talked about. So to carry us home here, I'll go ahead and hand it off back to Ferguson.
Appreciate that, Ed. Thanks for walking us through the demo. There's obviously a lot there that the tool, the application, S&OP Cloud does, and we just got a snippet of some of the things. But a great example of covering both rough cut capacity planning and generating scenarios, and then comparing those scenarios. Very powerful stuff. So to finish this up, we're going to talk a little bit about our approach and the solution that AVATA brings that we call S&OP Cloud Express, which is simply saying, how do we accelerate your speed to value? And before we start that, we get asked a lot of questions from our clients. How do we get there? But more importantly, it's to understand, why do certain S&OP or why do a lot of S&OP initiatives fail? And if we understand and answer those questions, then we can make our clients more successful. And when we think about this, and this is a gathering of information both from a variety of folks here, the Gartner and AVATA and even Ollie White have provided some of this information, and it's not uncommon that we see that 9 out of 10 companies fail to execute the strategy, especially when it comes around to strategic planning. And why are those reasons? It's vision, right? And only 5% of the workforce understands the strategy. They don't share that. They don't have them participating in it. Perhaps they talk about strategy at the beginning of the year, and then it's not part of their daily event or monthly cadence. S&OP, of course, answers that because the supply team and the demand and finance team are all working together and outside of their silos and reconciling one plan and working on that vision, kind of marching towards that strategic plan. Management. This is a real common issue we find all the time. Only 85% of executive teams spend less than 1 hour a month discussing strategy. It's amazing. For all the energy and effort we put into a strategic plan, we spend very little time once it's done to look at that. And of course, the most important thing here I want to talk about is sustainability. It's the lack of automating a process or the measuring the right KPIs. A lot of organizations will state a goal and they have a strategy, but they don't have a process or even the KPIs to get there. And so that's an important key. We talk about that, and we'll get onto that in the next slide about how we address that. And of course, most important of all is people in your resources. Only 25% of the managers have an incentive linked to strategy resources. Statistics tell us 60% of organizations don't link their budgets to their strategies. It's amazing that that's not done. So when we talk about S&OP Cloud Express, what we're talking about is the ability to take your organization, no matter what level of maturity you're at or your understanding about S&OP, and getting you to a position where you can start your first S&OP cycle, that is doing the 5 review meetings we talked about before, within 90 days. And so how is that possible? Well, we find it's very important, and where we've had a lot of success with our clients is doing a quick assessment where you are to make sure that your organization will have the right processes and the right metrics and utilizing the right techniques and technology. Not every organization is the same. Some are driven financially, some are market driven. It's part of their DNA. Some are very focused on ops, where others might be focused on demand. So everyone's a little different out there. And so there's a certain maturity level that everybody will start at that will be different. And so we're looking for what we call the right fit approach. And we're making sure that as we configure the software, the demo that Ed just showed you, there's a lot of options in there to configure it, that we are configuring the right fit for you to start with. It doesn't mean that's where you're going to end up, but it means you can be successful right out of the gate and start your process and start answering the questions that are being asked by your executives. And so that's a very important part of our process. We follow that up with making sure that there's an awareness and an understanding by the managers and the executives involved what they're trying to achieve with S&OP. And even more importantly is, how do you drive the automation that Ed just showed us? How do we drive the S&OP Cloud tool? And that's by getting all that legacy planning data into the system. And we do that with a very simple approach called E-Link. We'll show that to you on the next slide. What this does is, by utilizing S&OP Cloud and the fact that it's a cloud-based and deployed, it provides you a very low cost of ownership that allows you to automate the process that supports and keeps S&OP sustainable. We talked about this before. There's a lot of data that Ed showed us that's being gathered to run these plans and to generate scenarios. And so that's typically coming from your ERP systems, and it might come from other legacy systems or flat file systems, or in most situations, let's face it, there's a lot of data out there being managed on the desktops in spreadsheets. So we're trying to get you out of that environment. So E-Link and S&OP Express allows you to gather that data and automate that, and then populate it so you can use some of these cloud-based tools like S&OP Cloud or in-memory cost management. These are great applications. They've got a low cost of ownership, and we're collecting all that data from your legacy systems through E-Link. The nice thing about S&OP Cloud, you do not have to be inside of the Oracle ecosystem with all of your tools and applications in order to use it. It can sit on top of a variety of backbones in ERP systems. So when you think about the solution, or how we drive our clients to speed to value, is we do it through our E-Link, which is allowing us to manage the data and consolidate that so we can properly put that into the application tools and give you the results that you're looking for. This is really getting you off of the Excel base system, where most of our clients, we find, are dependent on different desktop tools. And of course, we all know the shortcomings of those things. S&OP Cloud Express itself, when we look at that, again, reiterating the fact we start off with an assessment, we're doing education and awareness, we're configuring it to be the right fit approach for your organization and your current organization's maturity level. And what that does is it allows you to start up within as little as 90 days your first S&OP cycle. Now, final thoughts to wrap this all up. One of the things that we've got to remind you of, S&OP is an executive-owned process. It's a long planning horizon process. It's linking current performance or proven performance on a monthly basis with your long-term financial expectations. It's ultimately answering the questions that our executives are going to ask. There's automation of the scenario generation and comparison of those. Ed gives a great example. What happens with the what if? What if we move a customer or a sales channel early into the schedule? What happens when we have constraints and we start moving some of the plans or some of our resources around? It allows you to generate those scenarios and compare them in a very efficient and speedy process. And ultimately, AVATA's approach, the right fit approach, allows you to start your first S&OP cycle in as little as 90 days. And that means that you're implementing an application and you're getting to it right away, and you're starting that process of maturing your own understanding about it and developing the skill set across all of your users and managers to generate a proper and well mature S&OP process. Deb, I'm going to hand it back over to you to close it out. And both Ed and myself and Eric want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule and spending that with us today to review S&OP in the cloud. Deb, back to you.
Thanks, Ferguson, and thank you also to Ed and our guest, Eric Domsky, for your participation today. For those of you attending today's webcast, we do have a free offer if you're interested in an S&OP Cloud Readiness Assessment. Please contact us for a consultation. Before we conclude, we'd like to invite you to connect with us if you're planning to attend the Modern Business Experience Conference coming up in Las Vegas in March. We will be exhibiting in 3 locations and have a number of customer speaker presentations as well. AVATA is hosting a fun networking event at Topgolf. If you're interested in joining us, please reach out to us for an invitation. If you'd like to share this webinar, you can find a link to this and many other resources on our website in the resource library. On behalf of AVATA and Oracle, we thank you again for joining us today, and we invite you to contact us if you would like to learn more. Send us an email, visit our website, or follow us on social media. Thank you and have a pleasant day.